We know that companies are required to constantly make decisions, and these decisions can be around the domains of profits, products, processes, technology, and people. Now, how do companies typically make these decisions? Well, they can be tempted to make these decisions based on expert judgment. Maybe they've been in the business for a while, and they just have a gut feeling. They could be relying on hearsay. Maybe they go to a trade show where someone says, "This is the latest whiz-bang solution that should be used." There's a lot of sales literature out there which can be good, or maybe not so good. Sometimes it's just out of exasperation. They just want some sort of a solution. And then many times we find that clients are just hoping for the best. The purpose of this presentation is to share the lessons learned by the TeamAct technology team. And what we're going to do is share our general approach and show some case studies related to how data can be used to make decisions. Let's start with the topic of which data tool makes sense. And so we've got little images here of, are you just working in your backyard and need a wheelbarrow? Are you trying to move a pickup load's worth of material? Or do you need an earth mover? And this really is a function of the use case, the cost, the complexity, and the maintenance required to effect the change. So what is our approach? We've basically broken it up into 3 types, again based on the use case, cost, complexity, and maintenance. Now, on the leftmost image, there's a system that we've used called Sensor Push. This is a very relatively easy system to use and deploy. However, it doesn't have a lot of flexibility. In the middle of the road, so this is more of the pickup situation, there's a sensor system that we started using called Swift Sensors that we've integrated into some cases. And we've packaged it with some relays and power supplies to make it easier for us to deploy. And then at the higher level complexity, we have a current system. It's composed primarily of components from a company called Moxa. It also has a small system from a company called Fidget that we use as a backup system. And then the new system that's recently come out, now it's this yellow box here. It's very similar where it has many capabilities, but rather than using a Moxa-based system, it's using a product from Opto22. When you're going down this path, the data processing component is also something to keep in mind. For example, with Sensor Push, there's no subscription, at least at the time of when we purchased it. With Swift Sensors, there is a subscription to process the data or store the data in the cloud, and it's a relatively moderate cost. Now, when you get into these customized systems, you have to be aware of what kind of resource you're going to use, whether it be Azure or AWS or something else. And then the costs are associated with the different tiers that you choose and the frequency of the data that's being transmitted. So, what decisions have we helped answer? The first case study we'd like to walk through was a wire cutting machine performance. On the left, you can see the current state that this owner had. Basically, there's a wire cutting machine where uncut wire enters from the left, goes through the wire machine that cuts it to some certain length, and can do a post-processing operation on the end of it to remove the insulator from the conductor, and the cut wire comes out the right side. And the question that the owner had was, should they invest in a new piece of equipment? Well, the real question, we thought, was what is the utilization of this current piece of equipment? So what we did is developed a monitoring architecture. This particular system we developed around a Varma system, utilizing an operator-actuated downtime and setup button. This was a manual button that the operator would press, depending on the scenario. We used a distance-based laser sensor to detect a part inside this machine that rotated with the frequency of each part being produced, so we could use that to count parts. And then we also had a current switch which we used to calculate when the system was on or not on in order to determine availability. And on the far right, we show what the visualization looked like. In this case, it was a visualization created in Power BI. So, what was the utilization of the current equipment? After monitoring the system for several weeks, we found that the data showed the OEE was about 19%. So the owner can use this information to focus on changing their workflow of operations to improve the availability and performance. So in this situation, maybe the best answer wasn't, let's get another wire cutting machine. The better answer would be, let's look at the process and get more utilization out of our existing assets. This next case revolves around drying room performance. In this situation, the owner has many rooms that are heated, and inside these heated rooms they have their product, which has to cure or dry for some amount of time. And so, the question was, should they adjust their drying process? The question that we tried to answer was, how long should the product stay in the drying rooms? Prior to us running this test, the process was to leave the product in for 24 hours, which is more tribal knowledge than an actual calculated time. So what we did was deploy some sensors. You can see on the left, it's the sensor push system we mentioned earlier. It's wireless sensors that communicate over Bluetooth to a wireless gateway. And we recorded the temperature and humidity of their product and gave them access to this time series data. So now that they have this information, they used it to find a way to shorten their process time from 24 hours all the way down to 2 hours. So they used data as a tool to get more product through their process and use their power more efficiently. You know, the sensor push system is an off-the-shelf system, but it was reliable and it was robust enough for the situation. So if an off-the-shelf system is enough, that will be the first choice rather than a custom system. This next case study is a dye tank utilization case. There's a manufacturer we're working with that has a finishing company for different metal parts, and one of the operations involves a black dye tank that you see here in the image. And the question was, there's a product out there called UFOs, which are a type of insulator that floats on top of the surface, with the idea being that it insulates the system and then saves on power consumption, water, chemicals, etc. And the question that the client had was, is there a business case to use these insulators? Do they work for his situation or not? So what we did is we set up a data acquisition system where we monitored power going to the heaters in the black dye tank. And we also had a thermocouple inside the tank monitoring the temperature. We ran a test for a week before the UFO insulators were installed to get a baseline. Then we installed the UFOs in the black dye tank. You can see them floating on the surface here on the image on the right. And then we reran the test for a week to see, was there really any difference? So the answer was, with the UFO insulators installed, the availability of the tank increased from 24% to 55%. What does that mean? Basically, with the insulators floating on the surface, capturing that heat, the time to get up to temperature to where the black dye tank process was effective decreased, and the time that the system stayed at that operating temperature was increased. So he had more availability of the tank for running product through it. And then he can take this information and say, okay, I'm going to get this much more, this increase in availability. And he can make the business decision of, should he deploy the UFOs on this tank or others, and determine when that makes sense for him or not. That concludes this presentation. In addition to dealing with data, TMAC has many other services revolving around quality management, Lean Six Sigma, and other benefits that small to medium businesses may require. Contact us today to learn more about how we can help your business. Thank you for watching.